All right, hello and welcome back to the Leadership Circle, where today we're going to have a fun conversation specifically designed to talk about, women in male-dominated fields with my friend, Cynthia Olavarria, who is the founder of We Connect HR, and in her work, both in her corporate career and now as an entrepreneur and founder supporting companies. Cynthia's really passionate about giving women a voice in spaces that traditionally tend to be very male-dominated, not to mention just really helping organizations, and I know this just in our work together, organizations better serve their people in an efficient way. So Cynthia, thanks for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you. Very excited.
Yeah, me too. So tell us, so if you would start with just a quick introduction. Who are you? What do you do? All that good stuff.
So Cynthia Olavarria, I am in Kansas City right now.
Yes.
I have been in HR for a long time and have worked on every area of HR. Decided to go on my own about 7 years ago. I feel like I can touch more companies if I consult. Plus, it's really interesting that companies hear you when you're a consultant than when you're an employee. So, yes. So went out on my own, work specifically with companies to help them with HR technology. Okay. So help them to figure out what they need to grow.
So what does that mean, HR technology? Because you said that to me before, but like, what does that look like for a company when you're like, hey, I'm going to come in and help you with your HR technology? What's going on there?
Payroll, applicant tracking, benefits administration, training. Everything is a software now.
Right.
So I get a lot of information from the software isn't working. It doesn't do what they promised. Can you come help me?
Right.
I'm growing and, I think I should get ahead of the curve.
Right.
So yeah, it's fun because I can see them grow and help them.
What do you think it is about organizations? Because you said that, right? Like consultants are heard so much louder than employees. And I've seen that in my experience on the sales side, right? Like I can come in as a sales consultant and they're like, oh yeah, we're going to totally implement these things. But when I worked for organizations, they were like, not yet, later, right? Why do you think that is? Like what, in your experience of all the companies you've been in, why do you think that that's what happens?
I'm not really sure. It's just odd. And I think I bring a picture, a global. So I look at the whole business, not just HR. So CEOs and CFOs, we have those conversations about what's going on, what are you not getting, what do you need more of, and as you grow, what do you need? And then when I do talk to HR, it's I know you've been here. What have you been talking about that I didn't hear you? And maybe I can help.
Right.
So I'm trying to help both.
Yeah. So let's talk about, your love for supporting women. And obviously you work in all sorts of organizations. You're not only working with, female-owned businesses or whatever that looks like. And I know that about you. But why your heart for serving women in those male-dominated industries? What have you seen in your career that sets you on fire for that?
So I was actually pre-law in college and worked at a law firm for a year and thought, no. If I wanted to have a family, it wasn't going to be possible. And all of the attorneys that were there had nannies, and there was not a work-life balance. And there still hasn't been a work-life balance. COVID did a little bit of help for that, but attorneys, IT, there weren't any women in IT.
Right.
So that was a new thing. And accounting, it's getting a lot better. So I'm seeing where they have to go in and fight to be heard, to be a partner, and have to work 150% just because of their gender.
Sure.
So I've always had that fight because they can't speak because they're in a corporate environment. And, as women, they don't like us to shake the trees. Right. Which is why I consult.
In general, they don't like the trees to be shaken, but it's even worse when we do it. Right.
Right.
And it's so interesting you say that because I literally did. I had a cup of coffee this morning with a gal who came out of accounting, right? Was a CPA, all the things, and generally, decided to become, a freelance bookkeeper and accountant for the reason you just described. She's like, there's no way in the world my husband and I would ever be able to have a family as long as I stayed in that business. And I find it really fascinating that, we hear that over and over again from women, that they're like, well, if I want to have the life that I want to have, I can't have it here. At what point in time do companies figure it out? Like, what has to happen?
I think right now is a good time because COVID really put a kick in them to the point of there are not enough employees. And in HR, we've known this for about 15 years, that what's coming up the ranks, there isn't enough of people to fill it. So they're really going to need to take the strength that they have. They're going to need to find the strength. And now, I mean, people who are interviewing, they want the company to have the values that they have, or they're going to walk.
Right.
So it's a courtship between you and the company. Do they have things that you like? And I mean, it vice versa. So if they want to continue to run their company, they're going to need to look at that work-life balance. And those that don't are faltering. I mean, they don't have enough people. They're going to close their doors.
Right. It's so very true. That courtship. I like the way that you described that, because I know when I graduated college and got a job and did all of that it was always positioned to me that, the company had something that I wanted and I had to prove myself to get it. And I feel like, right, there's been a shift in that, right, where it's like, it has to be mutually beneficial for both parties. And you see some companies, doing that beautifully, and you see other companies not doing it beautifully. Just depending upon, so from your place as somebody who sees the back end of the human resources side of the business, which is typically the side of the business which is tasked with, recruiting, creating benefits packages, all of those things that make people want to come work there. What advice are you giving those people inside of those organizations as to how to make their companies more attractive to job seekers?
I know that there are a lot of organizations that have women's groups. So mentorship, they're allowing them to have more professional personal development, which is great for us. I know that they're actively recruiting, and a lot of it is referral based. But regarding the benefits, they are really making a stride. And I know a couple of companies that want people back in the office, and male and female, they're like, no, I'll go in a couple of days a week, but I'm not going in because I'm not going to be tethered to you. And I think women now are empowered to say, I'm not going to be on the clock for 60 hours. So either you deal with that or I'm going to walk.
Right.
And benefits, they've always been really good about gearing them toward the family, but I think the communication has always been geared toward the employee, and they really need to open up that communication for the whole family. So that, there's a couple of instances where the males in the senior management have their wives handle the benefits. Right. Well, you need to help with that, putting that together and actually have a vested interest in what your company provides. Sure.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I think the word benefits has changed too, right? Because before, benefits always meant healthcare, right? But now benefits is a whole host of things, right? There are things like the ability to work remotely, or, more time off, more flex time, maternity leave, just other benefits, paternity leave, right? Like, let's talk about that. Other benefits outside of just, we take care of your healthcare. What kind of cool stuff are you seeing people put together to create better benefits packages?
So there are definitely the work-life balance. They are tracking really who's using their benefits and what is working for them. They're really looking at maternity, paternity leave, PTO. They're putting their pay time off together with sick. And so you determine what you want to use that for.
Right.
And sick leave has always been a part, but now they're understanding that more and more, that not necessarily the mom, but the dad can take off for if the child's sick. Right. I think there's still the hurdle on when you're not in the office. Are they going to see you for those opportunities for growth? Right. So that seems to be the kicker, and something that we're going to have to work through.
See, and the way that I have viewed it, and again, I I've worked my career, before I became an entrepreneur. I like to say that I was a remote employee before it was cool, right? Back in 2011, I was working remote for a startup based out of DC. I've worked for startups where, I was the territory manager of a territory. I haven't been plugged into corporate, for a very long time. So for me, I've always been like, well, we could just do this remotely, right? Like, why does anyone go into an office? What are we doing here? But what you described is absolutely a thing, right? Like, I promise you that I was probably overlooked for things that I was not even intentionally, not like, oh, you applied for a job and you didn't get it, but just like, oh, we could have had Ryan handle this. This would have been a really excellent opportunity for her to show her skills or for her to showcase her talent. But because she's not sitting in this office every day, we don't see her. So, I grew up in that world, but now the way that I view it as an employer is I love the ability to employ people, like to not have to just look locally for talent. It's ironic because I have 2 full-time employees. One lives in Columbia, Missouri, one lives here. But in the past, I've had, employees all over the country, which has been cool and exciting and fun. But to me, it opens up the talent pool, right? And it gives people who live outside of major metropolitan areas opportunities for jobs that they wouldn't have otherwise. But there is that flip side of it, right? So how do you see companies trying to mitigate that, right? Like make sure that, hey, we're actually looking at our whole talent pool, not just the ones that are actually here in the office every day. Have you seen anybody do that well, or what are they putting in place?
They're still working on that part. I know that they have a lot of Teams meetings. They have meetings where it's not necessarily about business, it's just to meet each other. I've seen organizations do 2 days, everybody goes to Florida or wherever, and they meet everybody and social hour, and they do some training. So I've seen some companies do that, but it's still not great. It's something that they still need to work on, getting over that hump. And I don't really know. I've seen organizations use SharePoint and a lot of different softwares and have a dashboard. And part of me just wants them to have a dashboard of all their people. Right. So they're always in their face. They might not be in the office, but they know who's on their staff. And that might be, some companies can do that, but some can't. So that everybody's visible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that idea. I've seen that done even in like co-working style environments, right? So where everybody's on Zoom together, right? But they're all working, it's not Zoom in this aspect, but everybody's here and this is your check-in and people can pop into the chat. I've seen this done well with sales organizations, right? Like what we used to do is I remember this when I worked in radio, we did what we call the 1-day sale when we discounted all sorts of shenanigans, did all sorts of fun things. But, they brought us all into the office. It was a 3-day event, right? There were donuts and pizza and it was fun and the energy was fun and exciting. And, we did produce a lot in that time because of the shared energy. But I've seen, sales organizations do that virtually on Zoom, where they create that same idea of, the first X number of people that schedule appointments, get Y and do that in that capacity. So I obviously don't know enough about organizations outside of sales organizations as to how you'd pull that off well, but I've seen sales orgs pull that off in a way where they've created that camaraderie and that come togetherness in a Zoom environment, using, maybe Slack and Zoom to kind of cobble that together in cool ways. So I've seen that work. Have you seen it work outside of sales orgs, like the way they've done that?
Not yet.
Not yet. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. IT has always been sort of virtual, and they've, from other places, and they've had some meetings like that with their clients, and they're doing project management. But I haven't seen other organizations and other industries that have handled that. HR is still having a hard time with butts and seats, is what I call it, where they want everybody in the office. I think COVID helped with not just having everybody on site, but it's still hard again, because they're like, well, where are they? Okay, you can call them, you can Zoom them, they're still here. You just can't walk down the hall.
But what's with the obsession of like, where are they? Like, what happened to but did they do their job? Like, why do I need to see them, touch them, feel them if they're producing what we need them to produce?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think I call it old school.
Yeah.
I mean, they want you accessible at any time if they have a crisis, if they are like, oh, I have this great idea, walk down the office and let's talk about it. I don't know. I have worked for organizations that they want HR in the office at
Mhm.
all times. And that's sort of why I went consulting, because can't be in the office at all times. And if something happens, I need to be accessible to my family. So
Sure. Yeah. No, and I see that too, right? Where, because I think of that, I'm like, do you know how many times in any given day I get a good idea? It's a lot. I have a lot of ideas, right? But I just, I've learned to slack my people and be like, do you have 10 minutes to talk through this with me? They all know it's never 10 minutes, it's probably 30, but we talk an idea out and we're good to go. And it's just fascinating. I do think it's that old school, right? It's what we're used to. It's the idea. And again, I love in-person connection because I do think you can build relationships in a really strong way, in ways that you can't virtually. Like, I am not anti the in-person aspect. I just think the idea that it's the only way to do it is really what's kind of antiquated, right? That it's just, there's one way to do it versus there's a lot of different ways to build an organization that serves people well.
I've seen a lot of organizations that when they have new employees, they are, they brought in some new employees that they're going to grow. They have them come in the office at least 1 or 2 days a week. So part of that is learn the culture, learn the processes, learn the systems, get a feel for your team.
Right.
And then sooner or later, they're going to move that out. But I've seen that where it's still in the office just a few days for what I consider new employees or new experienced right out of college or right out of certifications.
That's a good point too, though, because I literally, I don't know how successful I would have been as a remote employee at 24. Would I have had the discipline to get the job done? And not to mention the social aspect, right? At 24, I was still single, all of those different things. I met a lot of my friends at work, a lot of my social interactions at work. I also worked in radio advertising, so it was a full-time party anyway, but you know what I'm saying? Like, there was that. So I guess it's funny, like that was almost a light bulb for me, that I was like, oh shit, there's probably some young people that that want to be in the office for that reason, right? They want the friendships, the camaraderie, the social aspect that working at home you don't get.
Yeah, and they want to teach them the culture
Right.
and a lot of the processes and working through, exactly how does we handle this client. And a lot of it, they can deal online, but it's again that camaraderie. They want to know everybody's personality. How does that work? And they, a lot of team building as well in person.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. We could talk about that all day, but before we wrap up, I want to talk because you've decided to start your own community in the Be in the Room community. So Cynthia's one of our newest community directors who will be building a community here in Kansas City. Again, not solely but with a big heart for supporting women who work in male dominated fields here in Kansas City that feel like they don't have that group of other women leaders to connect with, bounce ideas off of, all of that different stuff. Want to share a little bit kind of your heart behind what you envision for your community, and then I'll have you share with everybody where they can spend more time with you.
So again, there's organizations that have women's mentorship, but I think it's a getting together and having those conversations and understanding I've been in that room, or the communication style is very different.
Right.
Learning how to navigate the waters. How have you handled certain situations? What has worked and what hasn't worked? It's also a really good networking event for this isn't going to work for me. I'm looking for another position.
Right.
And there's no judgment. You're with a company, even if they do have a mentorship, you still kind of hold back.
Yep.
Because you just don't want to, rock that boat. But I really want it to be open. And it's also really good to see those coming up the ranks. How can we help them? How can we help engineers to stay in school? How can we have IT, more programs so that we get more girls coming up the ranks? Right. So communication, how can we mentor each other? A sounding board, just having that camaraderie of having to deal with having a face every single day. Right. And when you were talking about a face, when you're in a male dominated, you have a face,
right?
And you have to hold back emotions because you don't want to be those emotions.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. Oh, it's so very true. So true. So if people want to learn more about you, spend more time with you, if they're interested in being part of your Be in the Room community, Cynthia, where can they spend more time with you?
So my website is weconnecthr.com. and it has all of my contact information. You can email me. My email is COK@WeConnectHR. My last name's too long and it's hard to spell. Yeah. So I'm always open for, a coffee, a sit down. If you're not in the area, Zoom.
Yeah.
I like to do a lot of work with streamlining or even networking. What are you looking for? What are you recruiting for? Really odd ways to recruit people, but right now everybody's trying to, so it's fun.
So good. Awesome. Well, Cynthia, thank you for, sharing the Be in the Room mission with the world, and sharing your genius with us. I think it's really important and great insight. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. You have a good one.